Hey Seacoast, my name is Matt. I am so glad you're here, and if it's your first time at SCG, we want to welcome you and ask that you do us just a little bit of a favor, and you can stop by our Welcome Center on our courtyard to learn more about who we are and what we do. Now, like always, there's plenty of things going on at SCG that you need to know about, especially during the summer. First, if you're looking for a way to get plugged in with the community here at SCG, I want to invite you to join one of our community life classes or study groups kicking off this week. Run for God starts this Monday, and it's an 11-week study that compares enduring running with enduring faith. On Tuesday, we kick off our Rebuild ministry and our women's Bible classes. Rebuild is a ministry dedicated to help of those of us who are feeling trapped or stuck, be it toxic habits, dysfunctional relationships, neglected mental health, or even unhealthy emotional responses. In short, Rebuild is a ministry that will empower you to step into the freedom the gospel provides you through discipleship. See, no RSVP is needed. Just show up Tuesday at 7 p.m. and begin rebuilding your life in Christ. Now for the women, we'll start a 3-week study through the book of Judges and Ruth this week to see the goodness and the ways in which God has set us apart to live differently. Whether you've never opened a Bible, have been nervous about opening the Bible, or you read the Bible every single day, this is a class for you. Then on Wednesday, we start a Financial Peace University class. This is a 9-lesson course taught by Dave Ramsey, and it helps you work to nail a budget, to even defeat debt and free yourselves from the money worries we all have. You'll join a small group for discussions provided with several online tools and apps and other life-changing courses created to support you on your journey. Lastly, we have a fun opportunity for your little ones to be part of the community as well. This Thursday is our Splish Splash Preschool Bash. That is a tongue twister. Bring your preschoolers and join us for a day filled with water activities, frozen treats, and so much more. For more information on these events or classes, you can visit our website, scgchurch.org/events. Finally, I just want to say thank you for generously supporting the work God is doing here at SCG. You can give online or in person at the black offering boxes as you head out today. And if you're in need of prayer, head over to our prayer corner in our lobby. Our prayer team cares about what God is doing in your life, and they'll be ready to pray for you. See, there's a lot going on at SCG that you need to be a part of. And to stay up to date, you can go check out all the tables on our courtyard or visit our website, scgchurch.org.
Hello, SCG. Good morning. Come on, let's stand up. And before we get started, why don't you turn around and say hello to someone? Shines with hope and grace, fills the sky with new mercies each day. We're alive. Let your glory pour out, Jesus. There's a joy that overwhelms our souls as we know our God is in control. Overflow. Let your favor pour out, Jesus. The day that the Lord has made, we will rejoice and be glad.
already done in their lives. Can we just take a minute and look back and just tell the story of how he saved and raised us? Come on, let's do it. See, I saw Satan fall like lightning. I saw darkness run for cover. Can you clap your hands like this? But the miracle that I just can't get over, my name is registered in heaven. Oh, yes. See, I believe in signs and wonders. I have resurrection power. Yes, I do. Still the miracle that I just can't get over is my name is registered in heaven. All of my praise belongs to you forever. If you got a praise, can you lift it? This is my testimony from death to life. 'Cause grace rewrote my story. Now testify by Jesus Christ the righteous. I'm justified. This is my testimony. This is my testimony. Yeah. This is my story. This is my song. If you're glad he rewrote your story, can you lift this part up with us? Come together, sons and daughters, bought with blood and washed in water. We lift praise unto your name. Sing the praises of the Spirit, Son, and Father. 'Cause our God will finish what he started every time. Yes, our God will finish what he started. Oh, this is my testimony. It's from death to life. 'Cause grace rewrote my story, and I'll testify by Jesus Christ the righteous. I'm justified. This is my testimony. This is my testimony. Yes, how you saved and raised me. Yes, we thank you, Lord. Can you sing this next part and declare it over your life this morning? Let's try this. If I'm not dead, you're not done. See, greater things are still to come. Oh, I believe. If I'm not dead, you're not done. No. See, greater things are still to come. Can you lift it up and say, if I'm not dead, you're not done. You're still working, Lord, yes. Greater things are still to come. Oh, we believe. If I'm not dead, you're not done. No, yes. Greater things are still to come. Oh, I believe, yes. We believe that you're still working, yes. This is my testimony. It's from death to life. 'Cause grace rewrote my story, and I'll testify by Jesus Christ the righteous. I'm justified. This is my testimony. Oh, I'm alive. This is my testimony from death to life. 'Cause grace rewrote my story, and I'll testify. It's Jesus Christ. I'm justified. This is my testimony. This is my testimony. Yes. We thank you for what you've done. You're working in our story. Yes. We give you glory. Yes. This is my testimony. Yes. Scripture reminds us that it's so important to share our story with others, because that's the meeting place where God gets to remind us through the sharing of our faith with others that he is worthy to be praised, and our lives are the evidence. So if you could just take a minute and just lift up praise for what he's done and what he's yet to do.
It was my cross you bore, so I could live in the freedom you died for. And now my life is yours, and I will sing of your goodness forevermore. Come on, let's go. Give him praise today. And worthy is your name, Jesus. You deserve the praise. Worthy is your name. Worthy is your name, Jesus. You deserve the praise. Worthy is your name. Oh, you're so worthy, out one more time, just the voices. Worthy is your name, Jesus. You deserve the praise. Worthy is your name. Worthy is your name, Jesus. You deserve the praise. And worthy is your name. God, we come before you today, just giving praise to that name, to your name, the name that is above every other name, the name that is worthy, the name that is holy, the name that is mighty, our healer, our friend, our redeemer. There are so many things wrapped up in that one name, in the name of Jesus. And so today we come here and we offer our praises to you, Jesus, and you alone. We love you, we thank you, and we give this time to you. Amen. You may be seated.
Well, good morning, you guys. I get the privilege of introducing our speaker this morning. So some of you actually already know him. He's been here many times, and I'm standing right where the table's supposed to go, so I got to move. He's been here many times, and every time he comes, he just brings a fresh word from the Lord that encourages us and inspires us. But for those of you who don't know him, J.P. Moreland is a distinguished professor of philosophy from the Talbot School of Theology at Biola University, just right down the street in La Mirada. And so that might make you think that he's kind of like, hometown guy, but he's really a hometown hero. He has written and published and edited over 100, like almost close to 200 different scholarly articles and books. He has spoken at almost 1,000 different colleges and churches, and he has been declared to be one of the 50 top philosophers of our time. And for some reason, he likes us, and he keeps saying yes when we ask him back. So I'm really excited for you guys to get to hear what he has to say this morning. He's already brought it at the 9 o'clock, and so I'm excited for you guys to hear what he has to say now. Please welcome J.P. Moreland.
Thank you. Well, thank you, brothers and sisters. This is my second favorite church in Southern California. My own church is my favorite. And even if it weren't, I'd have to say that. So, but it's always a treasure to be with you. I just feel shoulder to shoulder with you folks, lockstep. And I have a vested interest in your flourishing, because these are hard times in which we live, and we have to pull for each other because the culture is going crazy. And in fact, to be honest with you, we now live in the most secular period of American history since its inception. Every year, culture is increasingly going more and more secular. Atheism is on the rise. Hostility to Christianity is growing, and I foresee a time, and in the not too distant future, when a pastor who speaks about biblical sexuality from his own or her pulpit will be put in jail or fined. It's happening in Canada already, and has been for several years, and it's not going to be long. So. Something's happening in the culture that is moving more and more towards a godless spirit and a view of the world where God is whatever you want her to be, or whatever you want them to be. You create your own God, and that's great for you. The problem for me is not only that, but it is that in the church itself, we are finding through Barna research and other polls that the degree of confidence in biblical teaching is getting weaker as time goes on. Christians are losing their courage to take a stand for their faith. And when they do, they come across angry and defensive because they aren't confident that what they believe is actually true. There's a growing amount of doubt and a weakening of faith because Christians, especially in the younger generation, are leaving belief in God from good churches because they were not told why we believe what we believe, and they can't defend their faith. But I want to ask you a question in light of all that, and it'd be interesting to see what you would say to this. If you had to guess, what would you identify as the most prominent source of doubt in America today? What would be the number one thing? Don't answer it. But in your own mind, if you had to pick one thing, what would be the number one source of doubt in America? Is it discoveries of science that show the Bible is just not true or believable? Is it incredulity about some of the miracle stories in the Bible, and how in the world can anybody believe these kind of myths and fairy tales? Is it the intolerance and bigotry of Jesus' claims to have the exclusive truth and be the only way, which is a very offensive claim in our tolerant society? Well, none of these is even close, not even close. In his study of doubt and defection from Christianity, University of Notre Dame sociologist Christian Smith, who is a brother in the Lord, by the way, said that far and away the chief source of doubt in America comes from God's apparent inactivity, his indifference or impotence in the face of tragedy, and the apparent lack of God's intervention in our daily lives. Or to put it quite simply, God's a no-show. God just doesn't do anything. Maybe he did in the biblical times, but not anymore. God is asleep. And he left us a book that we can read about, but, and I'm glad for the book, believe me, but, in terms of counting on him to do anything that you could tell was a miracle, those are days long gone for a pre-scientific era. Now, this is devastating because this is impacting your life and my life in the church. We can't escape being influenced by the culture we live in. We try, but it's going to creep into some level. And the result of this is that people's faith and trust in God is growing weaker the more society becomes secular. Now, I have a different view on this, and this problem has befuddled me in my Christian life, in that there were a number of times that I thought it would be in God's best interest if he healed someone or answered a prayer. Not only would it bless his people, who would be emboldened to testify, but it would be honoring to him. But God didn't do anything. And in fact, 28% of the Psalms, which is Israel's hymn book, are complaints to God. They're called lament psalms, and they're complaints to God for not doing anything, not keeping his covenant, not caring about his people, just kind of going to sleep up there. And so it's not like you're being unbiblical if you have those kind of feelings or emotions. Except today we're taught that we can't be honest with each other, so we hide them, and everything is supposed to be okay. Well, it's not. But what I want to do is expose you to a completely different truth. And the truth of the matter is that since 1970, there has been an explosion of Book of Acts level miracles happening all over the world every day. And missionaries from all kinds of mission organizations are reporting that what has been happening in the world since about 1970 has been overwhelmingly shocking. And when Jesus said, "Greater works will you do than if I go to my Father," he meant that literally. There have been more resurrections from the dead that are medically documented in the last 10 years than Jesus ever did when he was here bodily. And some of these were people that were dead, at least one person was dead 2 days. And in fact had embalming fluid that was scattered on his skin. And he came back to life through prayer after that period of time. And so miracles are breaking out, not only in other parts of the world, but here in America. In this church, the problem is we don't know about it, and I want to talk to you about that. Now, I got so exacerbated about this problem that I decided to take my research skills and doggone it, write a book on it. And what I did is I wrote a book called A Simple Guide to Experience Miracles, and it's a book that explains how you can grow in your expectations for God to intervene and do something miraculously in the church or on your behalf. And I'll talk a little bit about that later. But what I want to do now in our time is to accomplish 3 things. The first is I'm going to help you understand the difference between a coincidence and an act of God, a real miracle. How can you tell the difference? Well, there's a way that you can tell. Then the second thing I'd like to do is to explain 5 kinds of supernatural events that are happening on a regular basis all over the world and including this culture. And I'm going to illustrate some with cases. I have 45 eyewitness cases that I have completely vetted and documented and interrogated people that I would stake my reputation on every one of these is true. And some of them are would blow your mind. And so what I'll do is I'll illustrate some of these kinds of miracles, and then I'll close with a little word about where do we go from here to encourage ourselves in this area. Okay, to begin with, how do you tell the difference between a coincidence and a real act of God or an act of a person who acts purposefully? This is important because sometimes you see God answer a prayer, but then after a few days you think, well, you know, that could have been a coincidence. And that drains the faith that you got from seeing what God did with that little question. Well, you know, there might have been a coincidence. You don't have to ask that question after now ever again, because there is a way to tell the difference, and I want to explain it to you now. It's called the design filter. Now, I want to start by pointing to your attention that in the universe we live in, there are 2 different kinds of causes that produce effects: impersonal causes and personal actions or personal causes. Explain. An impersonal cause would be a flash of lightning causing the splitting of a tree. There, the cause is the flash of lightning, and the effect is the tree splitting. The cause is it's just an impersonal event, and it is connected by a law of nature to the tree splitting, okay? That's called an impersonal cause. And we see those in the world. They're measured in a chemistry lab and so on. But there's another kind of cause that has nothing to do with the laws of nature, but the actions of an intelligent, rational person who does something on purpose. And this is used in forensic science, linguistics, archaeology, which is just one dirty dig after another, psychology, and the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. This principle is used there. It's used in anthropology. In fact, not long ago, an article came out in an anthropological journal where they had discovered a cave with some odd-shaped figures on the cave wall. And there was a debate as to whether that was due to chance and just erosion, or whether it was done by the Neanderthals, who were rational and did it on purpose. And they applied what I'm going to teach you to the situation, and it became crystal clear that was done on purpose by intelligent, thoughtful agents who created that as art, and it wasn't random or coincidence. And that's what I will show you now. So The intelligent design filter, which is what it's called, helps you decide whether some event was just random or done by a law of nature, or whether it was done by an agent, a rational person who did it purposely for some reason, either a great big agent, God, or a finite agent. This is used in a court of law, for example. Now, here's the principle. When two things are satisfied, two things are true, it is beyond any reasonable doubt that some event was produced by a rational agent who freely did it on purpose. It was not a coincidence or the result of a law of nature, when these two things are satisfied. Number one, the event has to be highly improbable. It has to be unlikely to have happened. It's got to be an improbable event. And secondly, there has to be something special about the event besides the fact that it happened. Something got to be special about that event. Even before it happened, we knew if it did, it would be special. Let me give you an illustration. Let's suppose you and I are playing bridge, and we've got a $500 pot that we're playing for. And I shuffle, and I'm the dealer, and I deal you some cards, and I deal myself the cards, and we both pick up our hands, and lo and behold, you have a hand of a set of kind of random meaningless cards, and I have a perfect bridge hand on the first deal. Now, was my hand a random coincidence, or was it done intentionally on purpose by an intelligent agent, me, who was cheating? Well, is the result improbable? Yeah. But you know what? Your hand is as improbable as mine because we have the same number of cards. If somebody predicted that you would get exactly that meaningless collection of cards, but they still predicted it, then we'd know the deck was stacked. Okay, so improbability has got to be there, but that's not by itself enough. What makes my hand suspicious, and nobody gets suspicious about your hand, even though they're both equally improbable, is this. There's something special about my hand and not yours that's independent of the fact that we got the two hands we got. And it's the rules of bridge. The rules of bridge say that anybody who gets a hand like mine wins. And so my hand is special. There's nothing special about your hand besides the fact that it's the one you got. I mean, we could call your hand a collection of random cards that don't have any meaning in the game. My hand is called a winner, and I pocketed the $500. Now, this has been used repeatedly in science, and it can be applied to answers to prayer and to healings, and whether God spoke to you or whether it was just your own imagination. And I'll illustrate how this works. But again, if two things are satisfied, the event that happened is highly improbable to have happened. And secondly, there's something special about it besides the fact that it happened. Then those two together make it beyond any reasonable doubt that an agent caused that event to happen. And in the cases we're considering, it had to be a really big agent, God. It couldn't be another person, human being or something of that sort. Now, that's how you can tell. So let's take a look at 5 different kinds of miracles and illustrate them. And the first are cases of very specific answers to prayer. And in the book, I've got some that are just absolutely shocking. There's one about the Hurricane Harvey, and that it's crazy. But I know for a fact it happened because I interviewed a whole bunch of people who saw it. But I want to give you a different one here that's, I think, going to touch your heart. In our church, I attend a dwelling place, which was the Anaheim Vineyard for a long time. There is a couple there named the Hendersons, and I think I stated her name wrong in the last service. It's Ruth and Bill Henderson. And they're these people that have been there for 30 years. They're, I'd say about my age. I'm 75. And they're just godly people, and they're fun. You guys funny. But they're godly people. They just reek with authenticity. They're all the time serving. They've got great hearts, and everybody loves them and admires them. And they're known to be really credible, wise people. Well, Ruth's parents, she was raised on the mission field, and after her parents got married, they spent their first 25 years of marriage in very poverty-stricken places, ministering to Spanish-speaking people in Central South America and also over in a certain region of Africa. And during that time, they lived in either grass huts or little concrete slab buildings that were, erected. They had outhouses, and they didn't really have any place for 25 years that you consider to be kind of like what you could find in our culture. Well, in the early 1980s, due to health reasons, they had to leave the field after 25 years. And they had children. They had 3 or 4 children in the Southern California area, including Ruth and Bill in our church. And so they decided that they would come and move into the San Diego area just north of the city. And the wife got a job teaching elementary school, public school, and the husband continued for free to help plant and nurture Spanish-speaking churches in the entire San Diego area. And he just did it pro bono to help these people. And they lived in this little apartment they were able to afford. And after a few years living there, the wife said to her husband, she said, we've been married now in 28 years or whatever it was, and we've never really had a very decent place to live, and we've never had a place that was really our own. She said, I'd like to, sometime before we die, and the sooner the better, I'd like to find a place that we could live in that was our own. I'd like to get a house if we can. And it doesn't have to be fancy, but just something that would be our own home, where I could fix it up and decorate it the way I want it to be. And so he agreed, and they sent an email out to Ruth and to Bill and the other kids and grandkids and said, would you join us in prayer that God would find us a place to live? So they contracted a realtor. They knew absolutely nothing about real estate. They didn't know anything about the housing market, but this realtor took her to 3 or 4 places. They looked at them, and they weren't particular, but they went to a 5th place that was empty because the people had already sold it. And as a result of that, the furniture was moved out, and it had been on the market, and it was a small house, but it was in a nice neighborhood, and it took them like 15 minutes or 20 minutes to walk through it because there was no furniture, and they just looked at it. And the wife said to her husband, this is the house I want. I believe the Lord is okay with this, and I would like to get this house. And so the husband said, all right, let's tell our agent. So they said, we'd like this one. Okay. And he said, that's great. And she felt compassion for them. And she said, well, how much money can you put down? And they said, well, we have savings of about $2,000 to $3,000 we could put down on a house. Now, the house cost $200,000, and back then. And okay, what do you make what is your salary on a monthly basis? And it was her teaching salary. And the real estate agent said, I am heartbroken to tell you. I don't even want to say this, but folks, you're not even in the ballpark. You need a down payment of maybe 4 times this, and you can't pay the monthly mortgage payment. There's no way you can get a house in today's market, and you're going to have to stay in your apartment. I'm so sorry to tell you that. Well, when they were there for a total of about 30 minutes, and a knock came to the door, and the realtor went to the door and opened it. And there were two gentlemen with white shirts. And as I said in the earlier service, they weren't Mormons because they didn't have ties on. And but there were two gentlemen, and one gentleman said, "Could I speak to the owner of the house?" And the realtor said, "Well, this couple has been thinking about getting the house, so would you like to speak to them?" "Yes." So this couple went to the door and said, "Well, hello." And he said, "Well, listen, if you're considering buying this house, I want to know if you would make a deal with us. We represent the cell phone company, and we're looking for a home, and we haven't been able to find one yet, but we're looking for a home that's located in this area because it's in the right location where we could put 2 cell phone towers in your backyard. We'd make them look like palm trees so they wouldn't be an eyesore. And if you do this for us, we would give you an initial just down payment or amount of $10,000, and then we would pay you $10,000 a year for 30 years. They got the house. That was enough for the down payment. And the cost of the house was $9,900 and something a year. And this paid their house off. In fact, they both, the wife died about 5 years ago, and I think that the grandfather died a couple of years ago, but they paid the house off before he passed away, and he lived the last several years there rent-free. Now, I want to tell you, that was an answered prayer that God did for that dear couple, just honoring them and their service. Is that precious, number one? But how do I know that's a miracle? Well, it's obvious, but let's do better than that. Was that improbable? I mean, what was the likelihood that those two guys would come to the house at the same time they were there? Because most of the time that house was empty and nobody was at home. What were the likelihood? Very improbable, would you agree? And plus they had just exactly what they needed to get the place. Was that a special thing that happened? Yeah, because that was exactly what they were praying for, that God would somehow provide a home for them. And when they saw the house, the wife said, I believe the Lord would have us get this house. And so the fact that the offer was made for that house was special because that was what they were praying and seeking the Lord for. That was a specific answer to prayer. And we need to keep our eyes open for these, and when they happen, share them with one another. It's very important. You're not bragging, you're bearing witness to what you've seen God here, you've heard and seen God do. And a lot of people are giving up on much of the faith because they don't think God does anything anymore. And what I maintain is he's doing a lot more than people know about because we're not sharing it with one another. And we're not reading things about this. More about that later. Now, the second kind of miracle is miracles of healing. And these are happening at an explosive rate. I'll give you one story about this. In 2004, my wife and I started attending the Anaheim Vineyard in 2003, and at that time they had a Monday night healing room where people could come to the church on a Monday night. There was a sign-up sheet and a desk where they could put their name and what they wanted prayer for, and we had 4 or 5 teams of maybe 3 people each who would come and get the next person and take them up in. We had 5 or 6 rooms reserved, up to a little private room, nicely furnished. And the 3 people would lay hands on and pray for that individual for 20 to 30 minutes. All right, so we had a healing prayer ministry on Monday nights. Well, there was a woman named Susan Semigran, and she was a Jewish individual. She may have been an atheist, I don't know, but she certainly didn't have any knowledge or any concern whatsoever about Christianity. And she contracted terminal cancer. She went through chemo, radiation, immune therapy, and her oncologist did everything within his power to help, and it continued to spread and get worse. In fact, at one point, he did a scan of her, and she had 51 different sites where cancer was there throughout her organs and her body, and it was spreading exponentially fast. The quicker it was spreading. And so he said to her, I'm afraid, I hate to tell you this, but you're not going to live, and I'm going to send you to hospice because there's nothing more we can do. But they are specialists in helping to provide you comfort so that you won't be in pain and helping you come to terms with your situation. So she went to hospice. And she had a friend who was a believer who said to her as soon as she got into hospice, listen, I know a church, it was our church, that has a Monday night prayer room. I know that you're not a Christian. I get it. But what do you have to lose? I mean, why don't you go there and just see if people can pray for you? So she agreed. So she came on a Monday night. I know the guys that were on the prayer team. I've interviewed all of them. And they took her up and prayed for her, and nothing happened. But she felt so loved and cared for and focused on that she decided she really wanted to come back. So the next Monday she came back again, and the same thing happened. The team that had prayed for her prayed again, and nothing happened. But she was at least blessed. So she decided she wanted to keep trying it, and she came back the third Monday night. And when they laid hands, when Kenny and Steve and another guy laid hands on her, she started saying, oh my gosh, I am feeling bolts of electricity come from your hands down through the top of my head into my feet. My whole body is electric and it's hot. And I feel like something's moving around and like I'm being healed right now. And she said, and this lasted for I don't know how long, but a fair amount of time. And she said after they were through, I believe I've been healed tonight. And Kenny, who's in charge of the ministry, said, well, I really appreciate you sharing that with us, but we like doctors, a written report from a doctor if you don't mind going to see your doctor. Well, she called her doctor, and he said, well, I'm not seeing you anymore. And so Susan said, I will pay for the scan. I want to get in this week. I have to get in this week. Can you clear a space for me to get a scan and for you to look at it? He said, okay. And she paid for the scan. And the doctor came out, and he had 2 plates in his hands. And he was, according to her testimony, as white as a sheet. Because he said, Susan, this is your scan, and not only is there no evidence of cancer anywhere in your body, but there's no evidence you ever had it. Now, he was afraid that she'd sue him for a misdiagnosis. Okay, I'm not kidding. So he had the early plate. She said, and I know we did not misdiagnose you because look at this. You can see, count them, 51 locations of cancer that light up all throughout your body, and now there's not even any evidence that there was anything whatsoever. You had it, I know you had it, and something happened, I don't know what it was, but you're well. Well, she gave her life to Jesus because of this. And 12 years later, I was contacted by PBS to be a part of a program that they were going to interview the world's leading atheist scholars in Europe and North America, and credible Christian scholars in the same area about whether miracles happen or not. And I wanted to share this story as a case study. And so I called Kenny, my buddy, and he gave me the email address, to Susan's email address, and I emailed her. And I said, Susan, you don't know me, but I blah, 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 blah. Is this what happened to you? And I told her the story. I've got the emails in a folder at home, so I've got documentation of all of this. But did this happen? And she emailed me back, and she said, oh my gosh, yes, everything you said is exactly what happened to me. And she said, and not only did this, what you said happen, but That's 12 years ago, and I have never had any cancer return to my body since that time at your Monday night church event. And I am still on fire for Jesus, and I go to a Messianic congregation. So it's stuck with her 12 years later at least, and I haven't contacted her since then. That was a miraculous healing. You apply the filter to that. What was the likelihood of that happening? Very, very small. Was there anything about that was special? Yeah, because that was exactly what the team had been praying to happen. So that result was already, if it happened, that would correspond to a prayer request that made its happening special because it corresponded to what they were asking God to do. Those two things indicate that this was a miracle. If you're an agnostic here today, you can't dispute this because it satisfies a principle that scientists themselves use in archaeology and a whole bunch of other sciences. And I'm sorry, but you can't use the principle in those fields of study because you like the results. They help you find the murderer. But you don't want to use it in miracle claims because you don't like where it goes. That's cheating. If you're going to be a consistent thinker here, whether you're a believer or not, integrity demands intellectual consistency. And you got to play consistent. If you're going to use it over here like everybody does, then when it's used over here in miracle stories, I'm sorry, but if it points to a miracle as it does in these cases, you're stuck with a supernatural universe. That's the only thing you can conclude if you've got any intellectual integrity whatsoever. Now, so many of you atheists, if you're here, and I don't mean to be mean, you're angry at God. You're angry at your father figure. And you had a bad family, or God didn't show up and heal your girlfriend when you thought he should, so you're angry at him. And your atheism is usually because you're hurt and you don't want there to be a God. It's not because the evidence for him isn't good. And I'm asking you to listen up and to consider the evidence honestly. And if you don't believe it, get the book, A Simple Guide to Experience Miracles, and read about it. And I challenge you to refute the miracle claims in that book. All right, enough of that. There's a case with God speaking. I've got a whole chapter in there on 7 different ways God speaks to us today and how to discern when he's doing it. And I can't go into that, but there are times when God has made known to me something, and I was maybe 70-30, it was the Lord, and I shared it with someone, and it was exactly what they were needing to hear about a situation that I didn't know anything about in their lives, and it could not have been a coincidence. But I've got to leave that because of time, but that is another area. Another one that I won't mention are near-death experiences. There are some 300 million of these that have happened worldwide at least, and the researchers have studied and recorded close to 100,000 near-death experiences. 1 in 25 Americans has had one. And these are not isolated events. They happen all the time. And people die, and they are dead. And they leave their bodies and go to hell, or they go to heaven, and they see Jesus. And in the chapter, I give some cases that are just going to encourage your socks off. But I also have answers to the atheists who think these are just brain deprivations. And I also answer people who don't think they're biblical. It turns out they really are. They comport with the Bible, 80 to 90% of them, though I didn't know that until I studied some stuff on it. All right. What I want to talk about are angelic and demonic manifestations. I'm going to focus on angels. So there's answer to prayer, healings. There's God speaking to us and guiding in particular ways. There are near-death experiences. I'm not covering those two. And then finally, angelic manifestations or demonic. I won't go into demonic right now. I have a bibliography of some of the best books to read if you want to learn how to deal with demons and how to recognize their presence. But I want to tell you about my own angel story, which I believe provides enough evidence that there are 3 angels that are around me now, protecting me everywhere I go. You have angels that are around you, but you don't believe it, or probably. And I say you don't believe it because you don't count on it and think about it. And you don't thank God for them. And every night I pray for angels to stand guard over my grandchildren's beds and my daughter's homes, and to protect them against any kind of dark presence that would try to drag them away from the Lord. But this started in May of 2005 when I went to Seattle to speak at a church conference. I spoke Friday night and then Saturday, and after Friday night, a 50-minute talk, a woman comes up to me, and before people were going to the hors d'oeuvre section, and she said, "Thank you for your message, but I wanted to let you know that while you were speaking, I saw 3 angels standing around you, guarding you. There was a tall one behind you and 2 shorter ones on either side of you." Well, I obviously thought the woman was crazy. I did not. I wanted to get away from her, and I did. I said, "Thank you, ma'am, so much for sharing that. I appreciate it." And I got away from her, and I went over to the coffee table, and I said to the pastor, I said, "Who's that lady over there? That one right there?" I said, "Oh, she's probably the biggest disciple maker in the church besides the staff women, and she has a real walk with the Lord." I still didn't believe her, but at least I didn't think she was lying, or I just thought maybe she was sometimes people get hysterical neuroses and they think they see things and they have images that aren't real. And so I just said maybe she had some psychological issues that were problematic. All right, so that was number 1. Number 2, fast forward a few months, and it's the beginning of the school year at Biola, which is August, and last week of August and the first week or 2 of September. And I'm going through a really hard time. And I prayed a prayer that I'd never prayed in 35 years as a Christian. I said, "Lord, I don't know if those angels in Seattle were real or not, but if they were, and if they're not here, or if they are here, would you send them back to protect me? Because I feel a need for protection right now. And would you somehow let me know they're here?" So I went to sleep. And about, I would say, 6-7 days later, I get an email from one of my graduate students who was taking a graduate course I was teaching in Meyer 109. That's a classroom on metaphysics. And I get to see Mark Stepp is his name. I have all this in a file folder. Like I said, every one of the things I'm going to tell you now, I've got them documented. And he says, "JP, Mark Stepp here." He said, "I've been thinking about sending you this email for 3 days, and I was afraid. I was afraid you'd look down on me." And I talked to a couple of the other grad students, Gary Osmondson and another guy, and they said I needed to send this. So I'm sending it, and here it is. And it says, "About 3 days ago in Meyer 109, while you were lecturing, I saw 3 angels appear for about 15 minutes. And they were standing around you while you were lecturing, and then they disappeared. And if you want to talk about it, I'd love to come and tell you more." Well, I said, "Get over here." I called him, and he was in the student admissions office working part-time, and so he came to my office almost immediately. I sat him down, and I said, "Listen," I said, "what in the world are you talking about? Were they in the room or in your head? Were they kind of in your head?" "No," he said, "they weren't in my head. They were out there in the room, standing around you." Now I said, I was thinking maybe that he was a little kooky. Sometimes there are people that see things that aren't there. And so I said, "Do you see these things, quite often?" And he said, "I've never seen an angel in my life until a few days ago in your classroom." I said, "My gosh," I said, "what was it like?" And he said, "JP, you were lecturing and they just showed up." And he said, "I actually drew a picture of it, which I've got at home." He's not a great artist, but there was a tall one behind me and 2 short ones on either side. They were robed beings in white robes, and he could not make out their faces. And I said, "What?" I mean, what did you do? And he said, well, at first I started rubbing my eyes like crazy, thinking I was seeing something. And 3 years later, I shared this at a conference in Georgia, where a guy named Ed Bort was one of my graduate students then, and he was a part of this conference. He was there, and he sat behind Mark in that class. And I shared this, and he said, Jay, he comes up to me, Moreland, I remember the day that happened, because I remember Mark was going nuts. He was rubbing his eyes like something was really, and I thought he had acid in his eyes. And I was that close to getting him up and leading him to the men's room and putting water in his eyes. And then he stopped. I remember that day, didn't know why he was doing it. And now I do. So Mark said, I looked and they were still there. And I got tickled about it. I said, my gosh, I was just sitting there thinking, this is the really coolest thing. So why didn't you say something? And he said, what am I supposed to do? Dr. Moreland, I wanted to let you know. Sorry to interrupt your lecture, but you got 3 angels hanging around you. Well, so that was number 2. I had the same thing happen to me at a talk I gave to a group of students where a girl who said the same thing and didn't know anything about the other 2, but I'm going to leave that. There are 2 more. This happened 5 times. I'm going to share the final 2, and then we'll close. The 4th one that happened was in, I'm going to say, the school year was maybe 2013. I got a phone call from a lawyer in Upland who said to me, Dr. Moreland, I'm not a student at Biola, never been on campus actually, so I will understand if you deny this request, but I'm going through a lot of anxiety and depression, and I know you've struggled with that, and I wondered if I could get an appointment to come and see you in your office. And I said, of course you can. Please do. So I set up a time, and he came. And we talked, and I gave him some helpful counsel, I hope. And then I asked him as we closed, I said, would you mind if I prayed over you? Would you get on your knees here? And just close your eyes, and I'm going to lay my hands on you, and I'm just going to pray over your anxiety. And so I spoke to the anxiety and commanded to leave and prayed over him. And then he got up, and we hugged, and he left. And I didn't hear anything from him until 14 months later. And it was in the summer. And I get out of the blue an email from this guy. And he says, Prof. Moreland, you're not going to remember me, but I was yada yada, and I remembered it. And it says, and I've got the email in the folder. Okay, I've got it at home. It says, I've been sitting on something for 14 months because I was afraid to tell you, but I can't sit on it any longer. I got to tell you that during the time I was in your office and you got me on my knees, I had my eyes closed and I felt the presences come in the room, and I opened them up and I saw 3 angels that were standing around you in your office as you prayed over me. And he said there was a tall one behind you and I could only see his head, but there were 2 shorter ones on either side of you. And I emailed him back and said, have you ever heard me talk about this, or do you know anything about this? And he emailed me back and said, I'm not really sure I know what you're asking me. I mean, all I know is what I saw, but I don't know anything else about what you're talking about. He'd never heard anything. This was an independent testimony to the same thing. Now, finally, in 2018, I went with Craig Hazen's ministry to do an apologetics conference in Beaverton, Oregon, outside of Portland. And I took a buddy of mine about my age that goes to church with him, and we're friends with that couple. And I wanted him to come and fly up there just to see what we do. So his name's Mark Stevens, and he came. And so I spoke that Saturday morning on the existence of God. And I was on a stage, and it was elevated. And so after I was through, there was a 30-minute break in the foyer of the church. There was an area where we invited ministries to have little booths to advertise their work and recruit volunteers, Stand to Reason and other ministries. And then we had a little book table for our MA in Apologetics program. So I was sitting there with a 30-minute break, and Mark was sitting right here, and there were the two Megans. They were both administrative assistants in the graduate program, and they'd been there a while. They were sitting there, helping to process people. And I saw this 40-something-year-old woman walking across the foyer toward me. And she comes up to me and she says, "I'm sorry, Dr. Moreland, hope I'm not interrupting, but I wanted to let you know that my whole life, including from early birth, I was born in a Jewish atheist family, and I've been raised Jewish culturally, but I've been an atheist my whole life until a little over a year ago. And I gave my life to Jesus, and now I'm a Messianic Jew. And a couple of your books have really helped me undergird the strength of my faith, and they've helped me answer questions to my relatives who've been kind of on me about this." But she said, "That's not why I came. I really wanted to tell you something else, because this morning when you were talking, I saw," and I said, "Stop." I interrupted, no kidding, I said, "Stop." I said, "Mark, I want you to quit talking for a minute. I want you to listen to this." And I got the two Megans who were sitting here. Mark was over my shoulder. And I said, "I want you to all listen to this lady who came to talk to me." Now I said to the lady, "I'm going to ask you questions." So I said, "Did you see angels?" And her jaw dropped, and she said, "How in the world did you know that?" And I said to her, "I'm asking the questions. I'll tell you later." I said, "Did you happen to notice where they were? Were they on the floor down below me? Were they on the stage? Were they hovering above me?" She said, "No, they were surrounding you on the stage." "Did you notice how many there were?" And she said, "Yeah, there were 3 of them." Okay, this is my last question. "Did you happen to pay any attention to their sizes or anything like that?" "Oh, yeah." She said, "There was a real," and she used the word, "tall dude behind you." This guy was tall, and there were 2 short ones on both sides of you. And I asked her if she'd ever heard about me, any angel experiences or interest in angels I'd had, and she was befuddled. She didn't know anything about that. And I have 3 people that saw that conversation happen and can testify to this. 5 different times, people said they saw the same thing without knowing each other in different parts of the country. That is beyond reasonable doubt that there are angels. I've never seen them. I'm not positive they're still with me, but I don't think I've done anything to send them away. And I'm not special. We've all got the angels that are guarding us, and they're in this room. They're all over the place. And sometimes they let themselves be seen, but other times they don't. But they're there, and they're protecting your children. You ask the Lord to station angels around your grandchildren or children, and it'll be helpful. Now, I want to close with where do we go from here? My purpose has been, from my own experience, to share with you some vetted cases that is beyond any doubt in my mind happened. And these are supernatural events like unto the book of Acts. They're genuine miracles, and I told you how you can tell with the design filter. How do you strengthen your faith in the supernatural? You can't do it by willing yourself to have stronger faith. It doesn't work that way. I'm going to have stronger faith. You can't do it. It won't work. Try it. You'll be frustrated. One of the best ways to grow in your faith is to talk to one another and share your stories. When you come to church or Sunday school, or you're with a Bible study at home, or you're meeting a Christian sister or brother at coffee, ask this question. Do you think you've seen God perform a miracle in your life or your family's life or in one of your very close friends that you really trust? Have you ever seen a miracle in the last 6 months? And you just wait and hear the stories that will come out, and you'll find out they're happening all over this church. But we never talk about them. The other thing to do is to read books that are credible. There are kooks out there, but read books that have real miracle stories in it. Now, I've got a bibliography in this book of a small number of books under each of these supernatural areas, demons, angels, hearing God, miraculous. that I have vetted, and I know that I trust them. I'll put my reputation behind them. If you want to read credible stuff on this, which will lift you, my wife and I have probably read 100 books on these kinds of things in the last 15 years. And it's just been so exciting. So that the first thing is expose yourself to the supernatural through reading credible books or through telling each other, witnessing, telling your story. Secondly, what about when God doesn't answer prayer? Because there's a lot of times God doesn't answer prayer, or he doesn't heal somebody, and it's befuddling. In the book, I would recommend you not start with the idea that, well, God's ways are higher than mine and his ways are mysterious. You may end up concluding that, and that's fine, but don't start there. It's lazy. Start with trying to understand so you can learn from why God didn't answer the prayer. See if you can learn something. And in the book, I list 14 reasons that are well researched as to why Christian thinkers believe God sometimes doesn't answer a prayer or heal somebody. Start with that, and you will find that maybe 2, 3, 4 of those apply to your case. And you can maybe learn how to readjust in light of that. Now, at the end of the day, maybe it doesn't, and you'll end up concluding, God's ways are higher than mine. I don't have a clue. Fair enough, but don't start with that. But I want to tell you, God is still doing things like he did in the first century. We just think he isn't because we don't get exposed to them enough, and we need to do that more. Thanks for having me, and bless you. Thank you. Thank you.
So before you guys leave, I just want you to hear that last thing. So a lot of times we'll come to church and we'll be encouraged, and then we just walk out the door and forget. But this week, I want to challenge you. Take the time to ask somebody that question. He said that it will grow us in our faith and encourage us. So ask somebody the question, how have you seen God work a miracle in these last 6 months? And I want every one of you, will you guys do that? Will you? All right. Hey, we got one person. She's going to do it. Go out and ask somebody that, and share your own stories, because we need this encouragement. The world is kind of dark right now, and we need God's light to shine through. So thank you so much for coming this morning. We have desserts out in the lobby. JP will be out there with books. Our Rebuild Ministry is sponsoring the desserts, so go out and enjoy. Thank you.